I'm Scott Hansen. I'm a professor at Southern Utah University, and this module of SolidWorks will include instruction on how to use the design library. Up to this point, for each one of the modules, we have started a new drawing or we've opened an existing drawing by using the new or open icons to the upper left. For this module, we will move the cursor to the far right corner, upper right corner, over the design library icon, which looks like little books stacked up. We'll left click once, then we'll left click on the toolbox, double click on the toolbox icon, and an error will show up and say the toolbox is not added, add now. So we'll left click on add in now, and it's simply just going to load this toolbox. And what we'll do is pull some existing parts out of the toolbox. So we'll double click on ANSI inch, and we'll start with a bolt. That's more of a simple part that we can import from the design library. These are pre-made or pre-designed parts that SolidWorks has had somebody draw, and so rather than somebody drawing their own nuts or bolts, you simply just pull these out of the design library. So we'll double click on the bolts and screws, and we'll just pick a hex head, double click on hex head, and these are all the types of bolts that are available as hex head bolts. Now here, rather than double clicking, we simply right click and we left click on create part. And so we let SolidWorks churn away, and it comes up with a generic display of what this part will be. If we move our cursor over to the left, the configure component dialog box will come up. We can drop down whatever size we would like. And we'll say we'll go with a half 13. The thread length, we can pick numerous options for thread length. We'll leave it at 1.5 inches. Thread display, we can change that to 1. Now we want to go down here and left click on cosmetic or schematic, which will give it more of a threaded appearance. Simplified will not. Cosmetic makes it look like more threads, and schematic gives it a very sharp appearance to the threads. And then here at the bottom we get a readout of what kind of screw we've actually created. And then once we look at this, we left click on the green check mark, and SolidWorks will crank out what we have done, and we can push the mouse wheel down, and we've got a nice looking hex bolt or hex screw there. Even goes to the trouble of having the top chamfered, which is an assignment that I give students in several of our classes. And if you look over here on the left, we can drop each one of these plus signs down. You can see that actually quite a bit of work has gone into the creation of this part. If just out of curiosity's sake, we can left click on the sketch below body base, left click on edit sketch, and here is the sketch that was used to create this part. So it's good to have this knowledge and know how to create these parts, but typically when someone is working on a design project, it's not advisable that somebody spend time creating bolts and nuts and keys and these types of items. So the best thing to do is simply pull them out of the design library. Then we simply right click, exit sketch. Changes to the parts can be made sometimes in the sketch area where we were just at, but a lot of times the parts seem to get edited where you can't use them, and it's always easier just to re-import a different part. If we decide that this is too long or too short, it's easier just to go to the design library, pull up another part, and type in the parameters than it is to change this part here. So we'll close this. We won't save anything. We'll go back to the design library again, left click, Now that we've loaded the toolbox, all the tools are listed up here above, and so we can collapse this little plus sign, and now we can move this down so that we have a better idea. But these are all of the things that appeared when we first started. Here's the bearings. We can left click on the little plus sign, left click on roller bearings, and down below it shows the types of roller bearings. So we'll right click on this thrust bearing, left click on configure or create part. We're going to configure it anyway once the configure component dialog box comes up, which is what we show here on the left. And then we can drop this down and select any one of these parameters. Number of rollers, we'll just leave it at 12. And if we leave the display at simplified, it shows that basically it doesn't show us the individual rollers. So we'll left click on detailed, and you'll see that now the individual rollers show up, and it'll even add a cage for us to keep those rollers at the specific distance from each other. And then we'll left click on the green check mark, and we'll let SolidWorks grind that out a little bit, and there we have a nice looking bearing. Now I think most would agree that it would be a lot easier to simply pull this out of the design library and enter a few parameters as opposed to designing this from scratch. And if you look over here on the left, here is all of the operations that were used to create this specific part. And that concludes this module on use of the design library.